Good morning, everyone. Kris here with Inspired Energy, and joining me again, Hartwell. Good morning, Hartwell.
Good morning, Kris. Good morning, everyone.
So, today we're continuing our little journey on the lines of the I Ching and human design. So, the line that we're on today is line 3. What can you tell us about line 3?
Well, we just had a line 3 experience. Um,
Mm-hmm.
in our house metaphor, line 3 is a transition between the first floor and the second floor. And like all transitions, it's sometimes a bumpy transition. So we just had
Mm-hmm.
a bumpy transition because my computer kind of crashed and I had to restart it. And this is very
Mm-hmm.
apropos for the third line because the third line is always discovering what doesn't work. They have a gift
Mm-hmm.
for it. Oh, okay. I did that and that didn't work. So the third line is the pioneer. It's the changer. That's kind of like keywords for the third line. And anybody with a third line in the profile, and if any of our listeners know their profiles, if you're a 1-3 or a 3-5 or a 6-3, then this is going to be applying to you. But the third line, it simply moves through the world in a way that draws experience and draws, it's kind of life bumps into you and you have to figure things out, or you bump into life by knocking the glass off the table or um, screwing up in somehow. And it's like you learn over time what not to do. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
The third line learns how to operate on the material plane. So it's kind of third line people are very down to earth. They're aware of what can go wrong, because so many things have gone wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And they figure it out and they learn, okay, don't do that. It doesn't work.
Mm-hmm.
So it's very much about a trial and error process. And because this is their process, third line people tend to be very resilient. It is the most resilient line, the most creative, the most adaptable. And they're also people who are willing to take the heat by standing up and saying to people, this doesn't work. Something has to change.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of interesting things about 3. It's a very juicy line.
Mm-hmm.
um, they're very tenacious, very adaptable. Um, they represent the transformation that is possible when we're grounded in our physical bodies in this material world. They
Mm-hmm.
learn through the school of hard knocks and they bring change wherever they go because the third
Evolution.
line is
Mm-hmm.
the third line is the line of mutation. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
It's the line of evolution. And they might
Mm-hmm.
appear often as rebellious because it's kind of like, why this is interesting. I've got this metaphor appearing in my mind. It's like, that metaphor, that saying, I'm going to rub your nose in it, or
Mm-hmm. Told you so.
it, it's kind of life rubs your nose in,
Mm-hmm.
you get your nose rubbed into life. There's no
Mm-hmm.
pretending, there's no escaping, there is
Mm-hmm.
no looking perfect. God forbid that somebody
Mm-hmm.
with a 3 in their profile has programming where they need to look perfect because it's not going to happen, or parents who are like that or something, right? It's not
Mm-hmm.
going to happen.
Yeah.
um,
Yeah. Exactly.
um, if they're not in alignment, they can get quite disheartened, and so pessimism can be the result. It's like, why doesn't anything go easy for
Mm-hmm.
me? They might have self
Mm-hmm.
judgment, they might have shame. So the third, the third is the third is a challenge. But if you
Mm-hmm.
know people with the 3 in their profile, these are the people that are not going to give you any BS. These are the people that are going to tell you, be the straight shooters and tell you like it is. Um,
Mm-hmm.
they're not gonna
Get you in trouble
they're not going.
sometimes.
Yes, I'm sure it does. I mean, they're not going to try and gild the rose. They realize that roses are best cultivated in a lot of shit. It's kind of like, life has that pattern.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, they have the aspiration for life to be sustainable. They would like things to kind of go on a nice even keel, and that's kind of how they work. But um, the way they connect, their theme around security and connection is bonds made and bonds broken. Why is that? Because they're going to notice before everyone else what needs to change. And if they're in a relationship that isn't working, they're going to notice that before anybody else, before, the other
Mm-hmm.
people or the other person in it. Um, so their approach to situations is, you know, um, they like to be partnered, but it can devolve into dependency as well. But as I say, they're going to see things when they don't work. They're going to see them, and they're going to call it out sooner than anyone else.
Mm-hmm.
This is all seeming very familiar to me for some reason. It's like so many of the things that I've known about you, Kris, and the way
Mm-hmm.
you perceive the world. Some of it's like, oh, all of a sudden today it's like, oh my God, that's why Kris says the third line
Mm-hmm.
in her profile. So,
Yeah.
is this making sense to you, Kris?
Well, that's the way I've always been, right? It's like, well, if you don't try, how do you ever know if it's going to work, right? And then it's like, why are you going to do that? Because we already know that doesn't work, right? And I say
Hmm.
those things all the time. So that
Yeah.
makes perfect sense to me, right? As well as the resilience and, like just keep going and keep going and keep going. And I think a lot of that is that gate of aloneness too, right? Having four of them on the two on the
Hmm.
personality and two on the design side is all part of that, right?
And one of
But
the and
it's
one of them is in the third line,
yeah,
even
and
more
also
so.
like just the way that you perceive the world, like you know it needs to change, and you're not afraid to say it needs to change, and whether that change happens or not is it's not always evident, but just the knowing that it needs to change has always been there. So especially when it comes to things like the evolution of the you know raising children and things like that, like all that makes sense. Like I've known that from the time I had kids, right? That all of this is like nonsense, basically. Like the way that we're doing things with kids is not the way that we need to do it so that they can become their empowered selves, right? Um,
Yeah.
so I've been called all kinds of things, looking at the world through rose-colored glasses and all kinds of things because I could see what the possibilities were. Always there was always possibility, right?
Well, I mean, in that way, that is you.
Hmm. Yeah.
The third line can be pessimistic,
Hmm.
but the willingness to stay optimistic and look at things from the bright side, that's all you. That's
Hmm.
not the third line so much as other aspects of you
Hmm.
maintaining that innocence. Perhaps the
Hmm.
gate 3 is part of that.
Hmm.
The which relates to innocence, but you keep going. So it's not only it's kind of you're
Hmm.
realistic
Yeah.
because you know that
Hmm.
things will not run smoothly. You know that things will need to change, that they will need to mutate, that
Hmm.
you will bump into the things that don't work. But
Right.
you also hold the vision, you also hold the vision for something being better. So that's a very powerful
Hmm.
combination that you embody. and model.
Yeah.
That's
I think that the other thing is that the three also makes you analyze things before you do it. So, like if there's going to be an event, well, these are all the things that can go wrong. Well, let's try and prevent that from happening. Like I find that that's the way that I operate. So, a lot of people go, oh, don't worry about that. And then that will happen. And it's like, told you so. Like
mm,
that's how I operate. Yeah. Hmm. Yeah.
well. Let
It's
us look.
interesting.
Well, yeah, that makes me think of your 63, the gate of doubt, which is one of
Hmm.
your third lines, right?
Hmm.
It's a very logical gate, and you
Hmm.
have the whole channel. So that is part of what has you analyzing things. So, yeah, for our students of human design, you're speaking, we're talking about the three today specifically, but some of the things that you're saying, Kris, are about your three. And you have
Hmm.
what? One, two, three, four, five, six of them, a fair amount. Some of that is
Hmm.
the three that you're talking about,
Hmm.
but some of it is other aspects of your design.
Yeah.
Being responsible for, say, the logical part.
Hmm.
Um, and you have, yeah, it's interesting there because you've gate 63 is the gate of logic, and you have that in line three, but you also have the gate of feelings, which is part of that channel of moodiness, which is all about willing to go on an experiential journey as you follow the spark of a dream. That's
Hmm.
in line three for you.
Hmm.
So we can see how they're actually, your awareness of the third line dynamic is weaving with the theme of the gate.
Hmm.
For me, does that make sense?
Yeah.
For me, I only have one third line, so I'm not as resilient as you are. But the 43, the one gate I have it in is the gate of insight. And I mean,
Hmm.
that's one of the things that's sweetest in my life is like, oh, when is the insight going to come? Oh, that insight didn't quite work. Oh, how can we look at this in a different way? Um, so there's this sense of I get insights, but sometimes they're partial insight. Oh, that didn't work, or um, I have some sort of, my mind goes through this. I'm always looking at things that interest me in a kind of a different way, and it's like, oh, that didn't quite work, did it? Um, and trying to communicate them in a way that makes sense to other people. And sometimes it works, and sometimes it doesn't
Hmm.
work. So that's as much as I can
Hmm.
say about
But
my line three.
but I can see
Um,
that the the effects of the line three in you and I and our dynamic when I'm like, well, let's just do this, Hartwell. And then there's like the resistance, like you're not as exploratory and things as I am. It's like, well, let's just
that's
do it.
very true. I
Right.
say, well, let's
And you're like,
research
well,
that
I
more
don't
first.
know.
I don't know that thoroughly enough. I'm
Yeah.
insecure. I don't need
Yeah.
I need to research that more because I have like 10 line ones, which is all about I need to know it
Yeah.
inside and out before I feel confident to. But you would think, well, let's just explore. Let's just try it. Yeah,
Let's
that's quite
play.
obvious.
Right. And
Yeah.
then it's like trying to invite somebody into that exploration sometimes is difficult, right? Because that's what I'm all about. Like, let's just try it. Let's just do it. Let's just see if it works, right?
Hmm. Yeah, it's a strength that
Like,
you
really
have.
excited about, yeah, really excited about the brood of dragons and stuff like Rim and you and I were talking about. And like that kind of stuff gets me all excited. Or when you come up with a new way to do things, right, in your readings and things like that's exciting. I think that's fantastic, right? Whereas sometimes you're like, well, I'm not sure if that's what people want.
Hmm.
But that's the difference in the three versus the one, right? Yeah. And the
Yeah,
lines.
and
That's
I was thinking
interesting.
about that. It is very interesting. I was really thinking about that the other day. It's like I have the awareness to think that it would be fun to explore more.
Mm-hmm.
Like I have the intellectual awareness, but I'm
Mm-hmm.
patterned in a certain way. So even though I would like to be more, I don't know, less afraid of exploration, I'm
Mm-hmm.
patterned in a certain way. So, so that is always going to exist. I'm not going to
Mm-hmm.
match your degree of willingness to do that, no
Yeah,
matter how much I want to evolve. But I can
but if we
ally with
can know
you.
that about each other, right?
Yeah.
But you know what I
But,
mean?
and
Like
I can
if we
ally with you and
understand
say,
each other. Go ahead.
yeah. And I mean, even though it's not a strength of mine, I can ally with someone with whom it is a strength,
Mm-hmm.
right? Just as you
Yeah.
can take advantage of my tendency to like to investigate things and get to the root of them.
Yeah, and I do
Um,
that, right? Like I come to you and I go, "Hey, Hartwell, what are the dynamics between me and this person or that and that?" Like
mhm.
I do that all the time because I know that's your strength, right?
Yeah.
And then trying to invite you into play, right? And then maybe you recognizing that that's what I'm doing. I'm inviting you into play rather than, you know, worrying about
Hmm.
how it's going to turn out. Just come and play, right? And I think if we recognize those two things, then that's what human design is all about, right? Studying it and then learning how to interact with others.
It certainly helps,
Mhm.
always with the awareness that the best results are achieved when we follow our own decision making strategy.
Mhm.
So,
Exactly.
um, yeah, that's kind of where that lands. Uh,
Okay. Anything to wrap up today that we haven't talked about the line three?
um, no, I think we've been fairly thorough.
Yeah.
Um, the three can be about laughter too. On a deep level, it can be about if there is if depending on the environment you raised as a child, there can be a tendency to have a lot of shame around your way of being, making mistakes and learning from them. And so that shame, one way to get past the shame is to laugh, is to
Laugh.
recognize that we're all fallible. And that helps
Mhm.
undercut that pattern of resistance to your own being, if you've got a lot of
Yeah.
threes.
I think
The
that's
other
where
thing I,
that having that in 30, like in gate 30, that lightness, because I always make fun of myself, right? Like
Mhm.
I can do that. I mean, I'm sure I don't do it 100%, but a lot of the time I do. And sometimes that irritates people because I can just go, oh, well, now we learned how not to do it. Okay. Now I look like an idiot on that one. And, like it doesn't bother me to do that. Right. Um,
Yeah.
so, yeah.
The other thing I would say, just to end, I think that what you say about that wraps up the three nicely is that I'm in the process of teaching a human design class in the basics. It's quite fun. We're already
Mhm.
into it, so really you couldn't really join in at this point. But the thing is, it's going to be offered
What?
electronically, so you can hop in maybe somewhere around the mid-November. Dates to be
Mhm.
determined, but it'll start to be available for those of you who'd like to do it electronically.
Yep. Via Zoom, right? Via Zoom?
No, it won't be live. It'll be based on
No,
the recordings that we have done of the class.
the replays. Oh, okay. So we're not going to do replays and then catch up so they could be current? I don't
No,
know. Something
probably
for us to
not.
talk about.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
We're
Well,
making
if
mistakes
anybody
and
else wants,
learning as we go.
perfect. So if anyone else wants any more information about their charts or wants to dive in more, you're certainly welcome to call us here at Clair-i-tea 587-596-3333 and book a session with Hartwell. He'd be happy to dive into your chart with you because that's what he does best. All right, with that, we'll say goodbye, God bless, and we'll see you next week.